My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is a scholar, a consultant, and coach with transformational change. Within this episode, we discuss reverting back to a previous gender. We discuss mental health. We discuss masculinity, the difference between becoming comfortable with being trans identified and also as being a man. Two separate, totally different things. My guest talks about that in great detail. We also discuss how to cultivate healthy higher education environments for people of color, trans men of color, men of color, right? So this was a really great episode. This was with someone whom I admire, and I hope that you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and I will be your guide throughout this journey on the show. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices will be amplified as we share our stories. Trans men of color are not monolithic. What that means is our journeys are not the same. We come from different backgrounds. We have different stories, family relations, chosen family, and most of all, we have different transition journeys. Visibility equals possibility. I like to say that all the time. We like to highlight on this show trans men of color businesses and entrepreneurs, parents, athletes, survivors, and many other issues and topics that are relatable to trans men of color in our existence. Dem Bois Podcast is not only a platform to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting, listening, and sharing the show. Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. My next guest is someone that I really admire. He's a scholar, a consultant, and coach with the Trans Formational Change. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, definitely. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself to folks?
Sure. My name is TJ Jourian. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I live on the unceded lands of the Lenni Lenape, specifically an area known today as Philadelphia.
Welcome from Philadelphia. How's the weather out there today?
And it's pretty sunny, like they say. It's always sunny in Philadelphia, and it's actually kind of true.
Oh, nice. Oh, so now let's get into it. I'm so excited to have you. And I, like I said before, you are somebody when I first met you that I truly admire. And the first thing that triggered my admiration for you was your intelligence and how well you spoke and what you said when you did speak. Outside of on a friendship level from folks, I'm attracted to folks that have on a romantic level. I'm attracted to people that are highly intelligent. I don't know why. It's just always something that I like. So to see you, not to say in the romantic attraction, I don't want nobody to get the wrong idea, but to see you and to hear you speaking, I was like, this is a smart guy. Like this is a smart ass guy. And I've always admired you in that way. And just to see what you've done in your life, your career and education level has always I hold you at a high esteem, I should say. So welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you. So to get into it, I want to ask you, how did the name TJ choose you?
Oh gosh. So I actually started to use TJ even before I knew what TJ stood for. I just picked it because they were the initials of my given first and last name. So it was just sort of simple to come up with and move into. And I started using TJ as a sophomore when I was in college. And it wasn't until a year or two later that what it stood for actually sort of revealed itself. It was summertime and I was working and living on campus. And one day I was just sort of like walking around and somebody just yelled out Trent, trying to call out a friend or a family member, I don't know. And something in me wanted to respond to that. So I literally stopped in my tracks. I physically turned towards where I heard the name being yelled out from, as if I was going to respond to him. I didn't see anybody, so I didn't say anything, luckily. But just that physical sort of instinctive reaction that I had made me realize that the T stood for Trent. So I guess sometimes the name does pick you. And once Trent showed up, I picked Jackson for the J because I've always had this thing for Jackson as a first or middle name, not as a last name. So that's a little bit more of a boring origin story, but basically Trent picked me and I picked Jackson.
Oh, I love that. And you said it's not boring, never boring, but that's the first time that I've actually heard that. So to me, you've always been TJ. That's just it. Never asked any questions. So thank you for sharing that and being open with that, Trent. I love that. I love that a lot.
Thanks for
Yeah.
asking about it.
Yeah, definitely. So please tell us, share with us your transition journey from beginning into where you are now.
Sure. So it's kind of hard to pick a starting point with my journey. I don't really ever remember feeling like a girl or a woman, right? I just knew that that's what everyone said I was, so I went with it. I wasn't sure why that never felt fully my own. Even as I learned about feminism and was always put off by sexism and misogyny, those things never really felt directed at me personally. But I didn't realize that it was because I wasn't a woman or a girl, right? It was more about this innate sense of fairness and justice. My history, I was born in Lebanon. I grew up in Cyprus. My ancestry is full of Armenian folks. So my history and my ancestors' histories are all full of injustice. So it's full of ethnocentrism, racism, hatred-fueled violence. So by extension, any form of oppression, initially at the individual interpersonal level, and then when I learned about systems, the systemic level, none of that ever made sense to me. And they often enraged me. I didn't understand why people let themselves fall prey over and over again to notions of superiority, to believing any one group of people was inherently better than any other. And that by believing that nonsense, that they denied themselves friendship and love and connection and community. And when you deny yourself those things, you're inevitably attacking your own humanity. But back to what we're actually talking about. So I never quite felt like I belonged in this gender category that I was given, even when I wanted to. I wasn't necessarily the epitome of masculinity as a kid. I wasn't super athletic. I was actually pretty nerdy. I was into school and books and Legos and things like that. And if anything, I was mostly androgynous in spirit and expression. But fast forward to a bunch of years into college, my undergrad years were my first time being away from immediate family. I went to Michigan State. It was my first time in the States. And almost as soon as I got there, I started seeking out queer people. Met a group of folks in the residence halls where I lived, joined this group called Pride, and then became really involved in a lot of campus organizing and activism over time. And back then, the term non-binary didn't exist in the way that we use it today. But that's sort of how I felt, right? We use terms like genderqueer to talk about ourselves as not fitting into the gender binary. And I actually came up with my own term to describe my gender, girl boy, just one word. And I spelled that GRRL, right? Putting some power into girl with that gur sound, right? Followed by BOI with the I differentiating from boy with a Y, just signal this like rejection of manhood, rejection of sexism, of male supremacy and privilege. I wasn't really ready at the time to really see myself as a man. And I don't think I was a man necessarily either. And one of the reasons I wasn't ready was because of my father. As the only man in my immediate family growing up, he personified violence to me. He was abusive and controlling, primarily towards my mother, and then his own mother as well. He saw himself as better than her simply because he was a man, right? He felt he was entitled to respect, which to him meant being catered to, not being questioned ever, right? Otherwise, you'd feel his wrath. And I was just not mentally prepared to align myself with him in terms of my gender. But then the movie Boys Don't Cry came out. Actually came out in 99. The first time I watched it was in 2000, but it wasn't until I watched it a second time in 2001 that it all really clicked. The second time I watched it was with another queer group on campus, this time Prism, which my best friend was running. So I was watching it with him. And anyone who's seen the movie, it's based on the true story of Brandon and Tina, who was raped and murdered by two cisgender men when they discovered that Brandon was assigned female at birth. And anyone who has seen it knows just how brutal that movie really is, right? And it's not really easy viewing. So after the movie ended, no one in the group was really in a mood to have a discussion about it, which is normally what we would do after watching a movie. But this one was really rough. And so folks started to just disperse. Folks needed to get away. And except for me and my best friend, and the two of us were laying on the couch in front of the TV. He was laying behind me, holding me. And without turning to face him, I said, Jordan, I think I'm Brandon. And that was my way of telling him I'm a trans man. And Jordan just said, I think I am too. And that was really the start for the two of us, both of us being really activisty and involved in a bunch of things in the community. We were involved in things like Women's Council and the feminist consciousness raising groups and things like that. So it became our sort of starting point to set on this course to come to terms with being men. I didn't need to come to terms with being trans quite as much as I needed to resolve a bunch of things to come to terms with being a man. And we made a commitment to each other and to ourselves that we couldn't be like the men that we knew, that we owed it to ourselves, to our values, to the women in our lives to be better than what we knew. And if anything, that's what really in transgender justice is a core framework for my life. And so that started things off. And that was, almost a little over 20 years ago. And it feels like that's been my life since then, is just me coming to terms with my own manhood, with manhood in general, and just trying to figure out this pathway.
Thank you for sharing that. I also saw Boys Don't Cry, and it was very, very tough. Just hearing you mention it, I'm taking myself back of where I was when I first saw it and how I felt about it. So for folks who haven't checked it out, definitely something worth watching. But be mindful of the movie and how it will make you feel, even if it's to watch it with someone who will make you feel comfortable and safe while you're watching it. So I want to ask you a few questions about your transition journey. So first, are you and Brandon still friends? I said Brandon,
Jordan?
great. Jordan, sorry. I
don't know why
I
you're
said
good.
Brandon. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon, Tina. Jordan and I are still friends. We haven't been in touch for a really long time. I've been trying to get a hold of him for a hot minute. He's never been great at responding to emails or Facebook or anything like that. So it's been even harder now. I know he's somewhere in San Diego, but God knows where he's at.
So if anybody listening, and Jordan, if you're listening, TJ is trying to get in touch with you, reach out, respond to those emails. So, and one thing that stuck out to me that you said was you both there was a difference between being trans and being a man. So the being trans was easy for you, but you wanted to figure out the manhood part. Why is there a difference in that? And we want to explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know that I probably mischaracterized it. I don't know necessarily that coming to terms with transness was easy, but in comparison to the man part, it was the easier part. I never had a hard time with seeing myself as being different. I always felt different. Having the moniker of transness just gave it a name, and it gave it an explanation, and it gave it a container to sort of understand this difference. The term man did the absolute opposite of that. It gave me another category to have to fit into, because that category is already established, right? There's an idea of what being a man is. There are these characteristics you're supposed to fit into. There's these hegemonic versions of men out there. And I don't fit into those. And I don't want to fit into those. And so it becomes this constant space of resistance and this sort of like, what parts of myself are me authentically? What parts of it are me conforming to an ideal that's not mine, right? All of these constant negotiations. Whereas transness is a space of expansiveness, right? There's just so much room to be you within transness. There's no limits there. There's no rules other than the ones we make up for ourselves. or at least there shouldn't be rules. I think oftentimes within trans communities, we start recreating some of the same systems we've resisted outside of those spaces. But in essence, transness is a world without limits, and manhood is not, is the opposite of that.
Well, I love that. That's a very good way to put it. And until you said that, I didn't really even think of it in that way, and how vast transness can be, right? And how we fit in there, and in whichever ways that we fit into it. And so I want to ask, well, what about your parents and your family? We talk about, I'm talking about birth family, not chosen family. And you spoke about your father. I'm going to say that he was toxic. Am I correct? So.
Yeah.
So how did you reconcile with that part of him being toxic and not wanting to be that type of a man? But how is your family open and accepting to you now?
So with my father, it's an easier story, because of the kind of person that I had been in my life and in my mother's life. Once I left for college, I started very quickly disentangling myself from him. And about a year or so after I started college, my parents separated. They never got divorced because it was a Catholic marriage, and yada, yada, yada with Catholic marriages. And but because they separated, I never had to necessarily deal with him anymore once I would go home to visit family and things along those lines. We hadn't spoken in, oh gosh, over 10 years. And then I found out he passed away in January. So that was sort of the end of that. I don't really know how he felt about my transness. He knew because the last time we engaged was at my sister's wedding, and I'd already started going down the physical transition path. So he saw me, all of that kind of stuff, but we never talked about it. And I didn't care to necessarily know how he felt about it. With my mother, it was up and down, right? I think my mother had a hard time with anything that could possibly make my life harder. And I think that's how she saw me being queer initially, and then me being trans. Because initially, that's how it was presented to her, was me identifying as a lesbian, kind of figuring out sexuality stuff before I was trying to figure out gender stuff. And she rejected it. But I think looking back, she rejected it because she was afraid of what the world would do to me as a lesbian person, as a trans person. So when I wrote her a letter to kind of express who I was, I wrote it to her and my sister. And at the later, I found out that she decided to not give it to my sister. She just kept it to herself, and she rejected the idea of this being my truth. And so we had a hard time kind of being in conversation for a little while. Then after college, I had to go back to Cyprus because of visa regulations. I had to return for a couple of years. So I made the choice to revert back to my birth gender at that point. I knew I was only there for a limited amount of time. I just wanted to do the 2 years I had to and then come back to the States. And I didn't want to make her life harder by showing up as someone other than who people expected to show up, and her having to explain things and defend me and things along those lines. So I made a choice to just go back to the person that they knew. And when I came back to the States, the first place I lived in the States the second time around was Vermont. I worked in housing at the University of Vermont. And that was also around the time when my sister moved to LA. She was getting married. My mom came to the States to visit both of us. And the second year that I was in Vermont, she came and visited and started to meet people that knew me as TJ. Didn't know me as the person that she had raised and had come to know. And she realized very quickly that people just saw me as TJ. There was no controversy around it. All of her fears started to melt away. People engaged with me with respect. They just saw me as a guy. And this was before hormonal transition stuff. So people just accepted my truth for what it was. Um, and I think once she saw that, once she realized this is who I was and I was happy in my skin, people were accepting, the world wasn't against me. Um, she she grew to see me as who I am. And later I learned that she actually helped my sister along. Um, so that's when I realized that the issue for her were other people, not necessarily who I was and how she saw me, but it was about like how other people would treat me and how other people would see me, and by extension, how other people would see her.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Bois Inc. I am also the host of Dem Bois Podcast. As you may know, Dem Bois provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO@DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode. It's kind of indifferent to what I would think of a mother changing a child's point of view of another child as the opposite of a child trying to say, "Hey, mom, this is my sibling, and this, you know what I mean? How this is how it's
Yeah.
gonna go." So that's wonderful that your mom was able to see that and open up in that way. And so you said that when you went back, you had to revert back. I I couldn't imagine having to do that. How was that for you? And what was that experience like?
Ooh, it was not easy. It was definitely not easy. Uh, but my village really helped me through that. Because my friends, so at that point, my friends were in Michigan, because I'd only been in Michigan in the States by that point. They knew that's the decision I had made, was that I was going back to Cyprus and I was going back to my birth gender and my birth name. And so they kind of started devising a plan, unofficially, not super strategically planned or anything. But one of the things, for example, my friend Jordan did was he made a funny tape, uh, recorded all kinds of people sharing things about me, uh, put a whole bunch of memories, and it was on VHS because this was that long ago. And so like he gave me that as a going away present so that I would have that to watch whenever I needed it. People would write me letters, not just by email, but would actually send me physical letters just to kind of like engage with me as TJ and just kind of like keep that part of me alive. And that really, really helped. Was just knowing that people still saw me as who I am. It helped me to kind of remember who I am, be in touch with who I am, and remember that this had an end date. That this wasn't my forever. I just needed to grit my teeth, bear it, and that I was doing it for a very specific purpose, and that it was going to come to an end.
I commend you for being able to do that. That is not easy. I can imagine not being easy. And I'm glad that folks in your community and your chosen family were able to help you to kind of like in the whole space for you, really, right? It's holding like it's like almost like a placeholder. It's like TJ is here. We're gonna hold this place for you because this is who you are. And so we're gonna remind you that there is a place for you here as TJ. So I love that. And I want to kind of pivot a little bit. So when reverting back, I can imagine how that affects mental health. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and how it affected your mental health? If it did, I'm assuming, but I don't know, right? And how did you cope and how did you help with your mental, like move your mental health along to know that there's an end date, right? How did you find support?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely can talk about that. I know that's um, something that's really important to you. And obviously very, very important to the communities that we belong to is our state of wellness, and especially at this time when we're facing so many attacks from so many different angles, that our collective mental health is taking quite the beating. As an individual at the time, I definitely felt that beating as well, right? Sorry, this is kind of taking me back a second.
No worries. Take your time.
So I think mentally, I wasn't in a particularly good place. Before I returned back to Cyprus, I actually had attempted to take my life. I had decided it was not worth living if that was going to be my future, was me going back to my past. Because at that point, I hadn't told myself that that has an end date. All I could think about was going back. And I couldn't look forward enough to see about the return back to myself. And so I attempted to end my life at one point, and my village showed up again, right? And I think that's been a constant sort of refrain in my life, is that at my worst, my village has shown up. And I think it's also been this constant lesson of how queer people, trans people, that's our community strength. That's our collective asset, is each other and the ways that we show up for each other and the ways that we build each other up. So I wasn't in a very good place. And when I went back, those, the letters and the phone calls and the VHS tape, all of those things really, really helped. Like, it was just those little bits of peace every once in a while that made it to the next day and to the next day and to the next day. But I never really resolved all of those things, right? So even when I came back, all of those experiences, all of those sort of rejections of self, these battles with self that were still happening. And I don't know that I really took attending to my mental well-being very, very seriously, because all I could think about at that point was, I left there, it's gone, it's ended, it's done with. But I came back having held on to all of those experiences, and it just sort of like sits with you. And when you let something just sort of sit with you for a while, it becomes a part of you. Today, I'm in a much, much better place. I've come to accept that I'm someone who lives with depression, lives with anxiety. I take care of myself through whatever means necessary. And that for me means taking my medication, first and foremost, and also taking care of my body. When I take care of my body, my mind and my spirit just sort of align themselves much better. I work out now almost every day. Exercise was something that I actually came to through the Dem Bois Project, which I know you're familiar with. And through the Dem Bois Project, I met this amazing human named Pat Manuel, who's a boxer and a trainer. And he taught me about how working out, and especially like things like resistance training, anything that puts us back into connection with our bodies, can be a place of healing. I think for a lot of people, a lot of queer and trans people, gyms and working out and those spaces can sometimes feel like places of conformity, places of violence, places of hostility. And he helped me really see them as places of healing. And so once I really tapped into that, I was able to take care of myself, see myself as a person worthy of being taken care of. And, to go down those places of self-love, right? Self-love also means loving on our bodies in the ways that we want to be loving on our bodies. So that's, I guess, where I'm at around my mental health, is taking care of myself in different ways, and being in touch with my village, letting my village take care of me when I can't take care of myself, and in turn doing my part to do the same.
I want to say, hearing you say that, and I'm thinking about privilege, and you and I have a privilege We have just based, folks can't see us, but just looking, I'm looking at TJ looking at me. Our one privilege that we have is passing privilege. And also, we have a privilege of living authentically as ourselves in the world. And so, I want to connect that with you having to revert back. So, what would you say to someone as a bit of advice for folks who can't live in those privileges? Or maybe it's not about reverting back, they actually have to live a life and a gender that they don't want to be or that they're not for safety or because of family or whatever. Is there any advice that you would give folks in that situation?
I don't know that I could presume myself to be able to offer advice. I think if I'm talking to the person that I was back then, um, all I could tell that person um, is you're living the truth that you have to at this point in time, and you're doing the best that you can. And whatever that means to you in this moment is right and is valid and is real, and that's all there is to it. Um, whether there's a light at the end of a tunnel or a deadline, an end date, whatever the case might be, today is what matters. Um, and you're doing what you need to do to make it through today. And that's all you can do. And so, to anyone that's living a life that isn't aligned with who they are in this given moment, that's the best that you can do at this moment. That's it. Um, there's no reason to force yourself out of that space if you're not in a place to do that, whether it's because it's dangerous for you or you don't have certain options in place. And I think just kind of seeing about that village. Who are the people that can make you feel like you today? If you have that in your life, I think the rest starts to kind of put itself together. But this is not me giving advice at all whatsoever, because I don't presume to know what is going on for folks, whether they have to be in that space, whether they're choosing to be in that space today.
Thank you, TJ. That was actually a good way to put it, and I appreciate that. I like to say, I don't. I guess you're right, though. It's not advice, but I would like to say, and I'm an advocate for mental health services, and if you have access to those things, that's a good place to start, because sometimes it's hard to find community of folks that we can trust and that can love on us exactly how we are. Sometimes that takes time to find. But I think that if you can have and you do have access means to get mental health services, I think that's a good starting point to help, help you navigate you being in that space. Because
Absolutely.
no one knows how it feels to be in that space but you. I can only speak to my own experiences. TJ can only speak to his own experiences, but with the right mental health advice, it can kind of help you navigate that space a little bit easier. So,
Absolutely. And I know that it has taken a lot of different attempts at that for me to find the things that work for me. Right. I think a lot of us know the experiences of accessing mental health, accessing a therapist that hasn't worked out, um, getting out of that space, trying a different one, trying a different style, trying Reiki or trying yoga or trying whatever else. And until we can find the things that do work for us, that do make sense.
yes, that's a great point. Thank you, TJ. I really appreciate that. Um, and so earlier I said that I really admire you because of how educated you are. And so as I'm saying, I'm looking behind you, folks can't see, but I see a shit ton of books. I see what I see is somebody that, you go to an older person's home and they have this huge bookshelf, or even you see it on TV, right? They had these huge bookshelves to the ceiling full of books, and you get on a ladder and slide over to, pick a book on the sixth shelf, And so let's talk about higher education for a bit. And if you would mind sharing your education. Um, with that, I want to ask you, as a trans man of color, how did you navigate those higher education spaces?
Way to out me as a hoarder of books. Um, I will say that library behind me. I buy books faster than I can read them these days. So it is as much full of things that I've read as it is full of things I want to read and things that people who I admire have written, and really, really brilliant folks back there. So in terms of higher education, it's actually also where most of my career has been. Uh, I think education was something that my parents instilled in me, especially my mother instilled in me fairly early on. I was a first generation college student because of that. Um, because I was this really nerdy kid who didn't quite fit in with anybody else. School was my little uh, place of heaven, I guess. I loved school. I loved education. I loved reading, writing, all of that kind of stuff. Um, and as a Gemini, I constantly change the answer to what do you want to be when you grow up. I still do. Um, I wanted to be a chemist. I wanted to be a journalist, a teacher. At one point, I saw myself being on the cover of Time magazine as Business Person of the Year before the age of 25. And that's actually how I started off my college career. I went into it as a business major. And one day I was in my economies of China class. And I think I was a junior at the time. And the professor was sort of walking around while he was delivering his lecture. And to make some point, he stopped and said, "We're all capitalists here," and went on with his point. But when he said that, time stopped for me. I couldn't hear anything else he said because all I could think about was, no, we're not all capitalists here. Because I've been involved in all this activism at this point with queer and trans activism, economic justice work, gender justice work, all racial justice work, all this type of stuff. And I realized that capitalism was something that I hadn't really quite bought into. And that's actually what really helped me navigate higher education, were these spaces of activism and these spaces of folks wanting to change stuff up. Higher education had become so much more than books for me. It had become a space of cultivating communities, cultivating environments, of building relationships and communities of trust and coalitions. I got so much of an education outside of the classroom that I had never experienced before. Everything about education before that day was about classrooms, and then it completely changed. And one of my mentors at the time actually convinced me that I could go into this field called higher education and student affairs and basically be paid to do all of this activist stuff on college campuses. And so I did that. I wanted to sort of continue doing this work of making college campuses better places for marginalized students, for queer and trans students, for students of color, for disabled students, and so on. And so I went to grad school this time, dumped the whole business thing. I was still at Michigan State at that point, studied student affairs, and started working in housing and LGBTQ affairs, multicultural affairs. And after a while, I realized that higher education institutions weren't quite happy with practitioners who had activist orientations, that they like to have our faces out there, right? Performing diversity and performing all of these things to recruit students, to placate anyone that said that universities weren't doing enough for marginalized students, but they didn't actually want to hear from us, say anything oppositional or to push for change that actually made an impact. And that's when I decided that I would switch over to the academic side of the house and pursued a doctorate in higher education at Loyola University Chicago, and so that I could become a professor instead. And my goal was to actually subvert this whole field of higher education by basically training up student affairs practitioners with activist orientations and intentions. And while I was doing that, I kind of fell in love with research, which was this thing that I knew I had to do to get the PhD. I had to do this big thing called a dissertation, but I actually just fell in love with research. And became more something that I love to do than that I had to do. I know that wasn't necessarily your question to begin with, Sean, but that's where your question took me. But I don't know if there was something else that you were hoping I would pull on in there.
Oh, that was good. That just shows your education. The education level. I love that. Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bois Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium? Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. What I want to add to that as a question is, how did you navigate that space, right? So going to get, doing your dissertation and being in grad school, how did you navigate that as a trans man of color?
So as a grad student, I think my choice to stay at Michigan State really helped. Because I was there as an undergrad as well, I had already cultivated a lot of community. And community was how I navigated anything. It was other people around me who helped me see that I was worthy, right? That I had value, that I had something to contribute. And those things became my motivators in the student affairs in the student affairs world as well. When I started my doctorate, one of the very cool things that happened was so usually doctoral programs are smaller. The cohorts are much smaller than undergrad or grad school, and there were 5 of us in my cohort, and all 5 of us turned out were all men of color, which is very, very rare. That an entire cohort of doctoral students in any field, let alone higher education, would be men of color. And this was the first time that I had ever been a part of something like that. I think as someone who had been involved in a lot of queer and trans activism, as someone who doesn't always come across as a person of color because of my lighter skin, I didn't always find myself in spaces where I was accepted and seen as a man of color. And so this was a very first experience for me. And it became yet another place where my values really started aligning. And so not only was I seen and valued as a man, but my queerness and my transness were seen as assets in this space. And it really helped shape my understanding of myself as having these identities as assets. The other thing that was really cool and unique about the program that I was in was doctoral programs can oftentimes be very toxic environments, can be very competitive. Academia is a very toxic space, but there was something unique about this program at that time, where the faculty that were part of the program really cultivated a sense of community, a sense of, we're not here to compete with each other. We're here to be supports for each other. We are here to help each other out, to work together. We are folks who bought into the idea that higher education institutions can do better, that we can build something better than what exists today, that we can advance liberation and we can advance justice through these systems that aren't built for those things. And so they really lived into it. And so it made it so that I could exist as a queer, trans, Middle Eastern person of color in all my complexities. It was the first time in my life that I actually got to exist as all of my complexities in one space and really, really thrived. And I experienced what it could be for people to thrive as their full selves within an educational system. So it was by design. It was by design that I got to navigate that space. And one of the things that was constantly happening, so yes, this program was fantastic. The institution as a whole had all kinds of problems still, right? And one of the ways that problem oftentimes showed up was every time the software system changed or was getting booted up, my name would revert back to my birth name, right? In my emails and in my systems. And every single time that happened, my faculty advisor and the vice president at the time were two individuals that would always go to bat. And the second it would happen, they would go and say, his name is TJ, his name, his roster, all of those things need to reflect that, right? And they would do this even as the institution didn't have a system in place to do this automatically. They would go to bat for me, which was a privilege that I held, that I had a connection to these people that really had my back, which again, right, it shows how individuals can resist these systems that are not built for us to make it survivable enough for us to thrive and make it better and to transform it. But yeah, that's one of the ways, again, comes back to village.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That I wasn't expecting that at all. I wasn't expecting you to say that you were in a cohort with all trans men of color. I mean, excuse me, all men of color. I wasn't expecting that at all. So how do you think that cultivated your experience better than if you were in something else? I mean, you weren't in something else, so you wouldn't know, right? But if for other folks that's in that other type of, they're the only ones in the room, right? How, if you speak to higher education, because that's what you do, what would you suggest for folks to incorporate systems as just like the one you went through? Programs, I mean, not systems.
Oh gosh. I think one of the things that unique experience cultivated was that because we were all men in that cohort, we talked about gender differently. And because we were all men of color in that cohort, we talked about gender in this really intentional, intersectional way that situated racial justice and gender justice together, that I don't think people expect. I think people hear men of color as a group and think the only thing that we want to talk about is racism. But the reality is there is such a thirst and hunger for men of color to talk about gender with each other. And that when those spaces are cultivated purposefully, intentionally, those conversations are really beautiful. Those relationships are deepened in a way that is very unique. I'm still connected to folks in my cohort. I'm work with them in different capacities at different times. And it's unlike any other relationships that I've had because of this shared experience that we've had. And I think institutions can learn a lot from that. One, that men of color are capable of a lot of things intellectually, right? Clearly, the faculty believed in us. That's why they selected us to be part of this cohort. Two, that intentional communities can be cultivated to really be supportive spaces, to be spaces where folks can breed each other's success and each other's thriving, and also create alternatives. So I'll give you another example. One of the things that myself and a cohort member created while we were there was this journal of critical scholarship on higher education and student affairs. So as graduate students, we had been talking about how toxic academia is and how higher education and student affairs could be so much more progressive than it actually is. And one of the things we decided to do was to actually do that for ourselves, was to create a journal, an academic journal that wasn't all of these really terrible things that journals can be. That wasn't this space of where people secretly trash talk each other, where reviews are horrible. There's this meme of reviewer two in academia, where reviewer two is this horrible human that just trashes every intellectual thing you throw, talks about how dumb your argument is and how you should have included this article or that article. But where a journal can actually be a place where intellectualism and activism and critical thought can be cultivated in a communal way, in an open access way, in a way where people are throwing around ideas together. And so we created that. We worked with a whole bunch of people and did that. And was just one tiny example of how when people are thrown together who want to do things differently, something different can be born out of it. And it's sort of in line with Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategy. Certain things are created only in the containers where it's meant to be created by the people that are meant to create them. And I think that's what higher education can learn from that, is that you just have to do things intentionally. You can't just hope that something different is going to come out of things without putting some intention and some structure into it.
So you are a coach with transformational change. You want to explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I named my company Transformational Change because I believe that only transformative, complete, radical change is what's going to propel us forward, right? And so that's what the transformation for me is about. Through transformational change, what I do is I partner with organizations or individuals, changemakers in particular, to align with their purpose, to align with who they say they want to be, or the type of organization that they want to be, to move courageously towards equity. Do that through consulting, through training, as well as through individual or group coaching. And what I try to do is I work beyond sort of these best practice formulaic approaches of step one, step two, step three, but rather I partner with individuals and organizations to design a process that centers connection and learning and balance and adaptability to create something different, to create a pathway that centers the leadership and the knowledge of those most in the margins.
Do you also do and work with higher education also?
A lot of the organizations that I have worked with have been higher education institutions, as well as nonprofits and some companies as well, and higher education associations as well.
So is this, what are you doing full time? Is transformational change and doing that is something that you're doing full time these days?
It is now. It actually sort of started about 4 years ago when I first moved to Philadelphia. I was having a hard time finding work when I first moved here. Eventually found a job planning events for a regional Quaker nonprofit in the area, which was pretty cool. But that was actually when I first started Transformational Change, was a few months before the COVID pandemic started. And practically overnight, I went from having this sort of fully booked semester of talks and trainings and consulting work, a bunch more being sort of planned for the summer and the fall after that, to almost nothing, right? So I stayed at my job, took on a few side jobs, and it's taken a few years, but I'm finally at a place where I can reinvest into transformational change full time, put my all into it. Just got certified this past year as a coach, and now I'm fully in it.
Beautiful. So what if someone listening says, "Hey, TJ, I love where you're going with this. I love this. I'm interested in working with you as a coach. You come coach, I don't know, and within our org, within our university, our business. How can somebody book you?"
Folks can definitely find me online on LinkedIn. So TJ Jourian, just look me up. I'm probably the only TJ Jourian on there. And you can also find me through my website. It's tjjourian.net. So TJJOURIAN.net. I'm on a bunch of other social media as well, but I think the website and the LinkedIn is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
We would definitely put that in the show notes for folks to connect with you. So before we wrap up, I want to know, is there anything else that you would like to add that we didn't talk about? Like anything that you want to say to folks, a bit of encouragement to folks, or any last words?
Any last words? I think if I want to um, say anything more is one of the reasons I went into the the doctorate program was because there wasn't a lot of research on trans people at the time, especially trans college students. And what little existed was done by cisgender people and written for cisgender people. And I wanted more sort of FUBU style for us by us research, right? Trans folks doing trans research. Um, and I think if there's anything else I want to share with people is kind of find out what it is that you want to do for people like you. Um, what is the thing that drives you to make your community better? What are the things that have helped you do better within community? What are the gifts that you have to offer? Because we all do. We all have different gifts that we have to offer to our community, and God knows we need each other right now. And there's lots of different ways, lots of different talents that are necessary that can pull our communities through this.
Absolutely. And I say that often throughout the different episodes of this show. And I mentioned before that I was driving and I saw a bulletin board on the side of the road that says, what's meant to be is not going to, this is not verbatim, right? But what's meant to be is not going to happen until you create it. Right. So there's always these niches for folks to create things. And it's not going to, if you're looking for it and it's not there, maybe it's the universe saying it's meant for you to create. Right.
Exactly.
So this is the part of the show where I like to ask the guest a random question. My list is still at 31. I randomly add them. I wake up in the middle of the night and say, "Oh, this is a good question," and I'll add it to the list. But the questions may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about today. So just pick a number between 1 and 31, and I'll read that question off to you.
Right. 17.
17. Number 17 says, what was the one thing someone told you prior to transitioning that once you transitioned, you realized was false?
Ooh. Uh, this is semi-silly, but also not. One of the things that someone told me was that I move my arms, my hands. I talk with my hands too much. And that because I talk with my hands, I'm not read as masculine. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And once, actually, before I even transitioned, I realized that was false because I was visiting family in Cyprus one year and I saw the cisgender men around there, right? Other Middle Eastern men, other Armenian folks, folks from that region, and men in that region talk with our hands. And so I realized that what people were sharing with me was about how white men in the US
Mm.
talk, right? And specifically stoic, heterosexual, specific type of man, how their masculinity shows up. And realize that there's so much more to masculinity than how where our hands are when we're talking.
Yeah, I think I usually don't say things are silly, right? But that's silly. We
Yeah,
all are different, and how you express yourself when you're conversating is how you express yourself when you're conversating. So when that person told you that, did you try to stop using your hands? Like, did you feel like you had to
I
not use your
did. I
hands?
did. Yeah,
That's
I did. And I could feel how much I was trying to sort of hold myself still, and it hurt. It physically hurt to do it.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I know the one thing that somebody told me was that um one thing negatively that they told me was, don't, now that you're seen as a black man, you can't be around people's children.
Mm, wow.
And yeah. And so that was another silly thing. And so I would be aware, consciously aware of how if I have no desire in children, like that's no, but I made an effort of not to look at someone with their kids, of someone going to think that as a black man, I want their children. Like, and I had to realize how silly that was. And so people have these ideas of what being a man is supposed to be about. But a lot of this stuff is silly. It's just that I can't even give a definition for it. It's just silly, right? We put these
Yeah.
ideas on what we think should be, and it's just not true.
Yeah. So. And it's really incredible how much people believe in these completely made up rules about gender, especially when then you add race into that, and it's just becomes this poison well of rules.
Yeah, silly. TJ, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. It was a pleasure. Like just being in your presence, I feel honored because I admire you. I've told you this before that I really admire you and the person that you are and what you bring to the community. So thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Sean, thank you for inviting me to be part of this amazing space you've been creating for and with trans men of color. I'm truly honored.
So we have reached the end of this episode. I want to say thank you for listening to Dem Bois Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. Be sure to visit our website at dembois.org. That is DEMBOIS.org. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook. If you think you would be a great guest on the show, or if you know somebody you think would be a great guest on the show, there's multiple ways to request to be a guest on the show. First is you can go visit our Instagram page, click the link in our bio, and from there you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Or you can visit our website, click the programs tab up top, scroll down to podcasts, click the podcast button, and from there on the podcast page, you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Yo, we need questions, y'all. If you have those burning questions, a question that you want to ask me or a future guest on the show, there's multiple ways that you can send in questions, right? So first, you can go to Instagram, DM us that question, or you can email us at hello@dembois.org. That's HELLO, like hi, at dembois.org. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share this show out with your friends and other folks in your networks. So until next time, take care.